Welcome back to the channel. This is Roberto with Full Curl Precision. For those who haven't yet, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. For tonight's topic, we're going to do a new series here of cartridges that should be popular that aren't, and I don't understand why. But besides that, we're going to share some observations on this. So everyone compares this cartridge to the 308. Now, I get where the 308 is more popular because it is a military round. You have the 7.6 to NATO. So there's all these things that go with it, right? And this cartridge, while somewhat similar, is actually a lot better. Had this cartridge been introduced today compared to when it was actually released, I think you would have done a lot better. I actually think Thompson Center should bring it back and try to push it a little more. That might give away what I'm talking about. The 30 TC, the 30 Thompson Center. Now, why this cartridge? Well, here's the thing. It is a 30-degree shoulder, so similar to what Hornady is doing now with theirs, right? Compared to the 20-degree shoulder, so it held a little bit more. Slightly straightened out body. It's basically, think of it as a moderately acquiesced 308. That's really what it did. Now, the numbers on GRT aren't exactly accurate when it comes to this specific cartridge, but it doesn't mean it's not going to give some good insight. Now, here's the thing about it, too. While they never really put it to SAAMI spec as a slightly higher pressure, and it did handle pressure a little bit better than the 308 did. So for this, I put it to 65,000. Now, a lot of people try to compare it with a 150 grain bullet, but they did go through different weights with it too, 165s, 180s, right? So I went with middle of the road, 165 grain, and granted, this is giving the one bit of data. I think that this actually gets a lot better than that, especially out of their rifles. Because Thompson Center invented 5R rifling. And for those who don't understand, so most rifling, that's the actual grooves that grip the bullet and spin it. Standard 6 is what most rifles are. Thompson Center figured out if you remove one and kind of reshape how it's done, you can get less resistance, therefore faster velocities. And they indeed did. They had less recoil, better barrel life, better accuracy, and it shot faster. So this information is based upon sea level standard 6. But I'm going to tell you right now, everything on this is probably every bit of 75 feet to 100 feet per second slower than what these cartridges were actually getting. So I'm going to turn the camera around and I'm going to show it to you. So yeah, this is the 30 TC. Now, notice it 24-inch barrel because that's how it was. If you look at this compared to a 308, you notice that it has that sharper shoulder angle, so that of the 30 degrees. That makes a big difference in terms of you're being able to hold a little bit more powder and be able to hold your alignment better. I went through several powders with this, and this is what I settled on because it seemed to do the best on here. 41 grains of Hodgdon. Come back. I didn't say you could turn off. There you go. Yeah. 41 grains of Hodgdon H4893 with a 165 grain TGK. Pushing it right up the red line. So here he goes. You got 63,689 PSI. You got muzzle velocity of 2791. Now, I'm telling you right now, for a fact, you could get 2850 and the almost 2900 out of this cartridge with a 165 grain bullet. That's not a joke either. And if you look at this, check out this load ratio in burn propellant. 99.5% and 100%. Like, talk about a very efficient cartridge. There's no reason why the 30TC shouldn't be more popular than the 308. It just never really took off. People didn't really understand or appreciate what it was going for. And let me see if I can get a proper image of what that would look like. If we go over to here, let me add a tab. And we're going to do 30 TC. If we go to images, so let me actually put in 30TC versus 308. So if we're looking at this, so on the right-hand side, you got the 6.5 Creedmoor. On the left-hand side, you got the 308. And right in the center, you have the 30TC. Now, if you really look at them, yeah, the 308 is a little longer, but the 30TC has that sharper shoulder and is a little straighter in the body. It actually ended up holding more powder than the 308 did. Yeah, it's a little shorter, but overall, it did a lot better than the 308 did as far as its overall performance. It actually has tighter tolerances inside the chamber. So if you were to take a standard 308 and then put it next to a 30TC, as far as its accuracy, you're going to notice that the 30TC will outperform the 308. And that's not me making it up. You can actually go look at the semi-spec cartridges and what the chamber tolerances are. The 30TC was basically, think of it as a 30 Creedmoor. That's really what it is. It's a very good cartridge. The problem was that at the time, the high BC longer throat cartridges weren't all that popular yet. They were getting there, but they weren't all that popular. Had they introduced it now with a slightly longer throat, slightly longer lead in the throat, where they could seat it out a little further, I have no doubt that this would take over as far as the 30 caliber Short Kings. It is a fantastic cartridge. So the question is, though, why didn't it? Well, it's very, very, very simple. It didn't do so much more than the 308 to the point that people felt that there was a need to switch over. Again, long-range hunting and target shooting wasn't quite there as popular as it is now. So you're talking about 15 years ago, I think it was right around 2010, give or take a year or two, that this cartridge came out. So they were trying, but I think they were a little too ahead of their time. So the guys who are hand loading, they were getting similar performances, similar trajectories, all this other stuff. Had they seated it out further where they could see a little bit better bullet quality into that cartridge, they would have taken over that space. I have no doubt about that, because it is that good of a cartridge. If you actually go and side by side compare them, yeah, it is a better cartridge than the 308. But it wasn't so much more that the guys who were looking for something felt the need for it, especially when you consider it was about $10 a box more for ammunition. Again, I've said this so many times, and I'll say it again. The cost of something is what holds it back. It's not its performance, it's its cost. Same thing with the 280 Ackley Improved. It has nothing to do with its performance and everything to do with its cost. The cost is what's holding that cartridge back. So the same thing with the 30TC. It was a little bit more money. It was about $5 to $10 a box more with the same weight bullets. And your speed velocities, I said, about 75 feet per second difference. For the guys who hunted back east where I was, like I said, 200-yard shot was like it. there weren't many longer range shots, you're not seeing a significant difference there. Now, out here in the western states, yes, the 30TC would have absolutely taken over that space because it was better than the 308 in that application. But you'd have to be shooting out there 500, 600, 700 yards in order to start seeing the benefits, right? So while it was definitely a better case and a better cartridge, it didn't do it so much better to where people felt the need to go with the 30TC. And again, I've said this before, and I know I just mentioned it, but had they marketed it with a better price point than they did, and had more companies adopted it than just Thompson Center, right? Because the only ones that were selling rifles chambered in it were Thompson Center. So you had the Thompson Center Encore, the Pro Hunters, the Icon, the Venture. So that was it. There weren't a whole bunch of rifles available into it. You had like basically like 3 or 4 different rifle options, all by the same manufacturer. That kind of creates its own problem, right? But had it been available, let's say, in something like a Winchester Model 70, or a Browning X-Bolt, or whatever manufacturer you wanted to think of, would this have done better? Absolutely. So it also suffered from one thing, and I've said this before in other videos. You can't name a cartridge after your own company. I will say that again. You cannot name a cartridge after your own company. If you look at the cartridges of today that have great success, none of them have been named after a specific company. You look at the Creedmoor line, even though we all know Hornady is the one who's pushing it, did they name it after themselves? No. If you look at the PRC lineup, again, doing pretty good, but they didn't name it after themselves. How many people know about the Ruger Compact Magnum line? Not many. They're really good cartridges to the point that Hornady jumped on that bandwagon and created the PRC line out of it. But how many rifles and factory offerings do you see in a Ruger Compact Magnum? Not many. Why? Simple. They named them after themselves. They didn't name it something else and try to get others on board. The same thing with a lot of WSM line, right? Now that's actually more or less the exception to the rule. So the WSMs did get chambered in more rifles than just Winchester and Browning. So they did relatively well. But overall, you don't see a bunch of new cartridges named after companies that do phenomenally well. For instance, if you look at Weatherby, how many manufacturers outside of Weatherby are actually producing rifles chambered in Weatherbys? How about Nosler's? No, Weatherby is the only one manufacturing Weatherby rifles in Weatherby cartridges. And Nosler is the only one producing rifles, well, for the most part. The 28 Nosler is the exception. It's starting to take off a little bit more. The 280 Ackley is starting to get a little bit better. But there's the rule, and then there's the exception to the rule. So the 30TC, that's tonight's cartridge, obscure cartridge that should be doing better, that isn't. So I appreciate all the support. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, and we'll talk to you again.